So Morgan, tell me a little bit about your background and why you came to talk to Mr. Vahidi.
I've suffered from dysphoria my entire life. As a child, I didn't have the language or the understanding to figure out what that meant or what that was. I just knew that I reached a point at the beginning of this year where I just couldn't see a future which was worth me living in, really. I was having issues with my medication. I was on antidepressants, which weren't really doing an awful lot. It actually kind of started because I was going to my sister's wedding, and we were choosing what we were going to wear, and my mum was brilliant. She handmade me this amazing Victorian men's frock coat, which was absolutely stunning. And then, of course, came the discussion, well, what are you going to wear under it? And this is not a discussion that I've had since I was probably 13 and decided that compression, garments and things like that, that's the route that I went down, bandages and what have you. So thankfully I've managed to kind of suppress that issue for most of my life and not really had to deal with it again. And then my mum said, well, you can't wear those because it'll ruin the shape of your jacket. You need to have some underwear that's going to be right for it. And I just went into a spiral, and it was all those years of pain and sticking my head in the sand and not really confronting it.
You strike me as a person who just copes.
Yes, yes, exactly. It's one of these. I have this image of myself as someone who's strong. I do martial arts. I like to think of myself as a fighter and someone who will go on and will be strong and can deal with whatever life is going to throw at them. And I can, and I have, and I will continue to do so. But it takes a massive toll. And
is that because the person that you're shielding is very vulnerable?
Yes, I think so. I don't think I'm as strong as I like to believe. I think my mum always used to say that it was a suit of armor. I'm not especially communicative. I'm autistic. I don't wear my heart on my sleeve. People who don't know me think that I'm sort of aloof or that I don't really feel very much. I'm not, which is the furthest thing from the truth. I feel very deeply, but it doesn't show on my face. It doesn't show in my actions. But most of the time I'm just, I'm struggling, quite sensitive and vulnerable, and things do upset me very easily. Not that you'd know it, because I just shut down when things do upset me. So
this spiral that you talk about, was that because of your chest and a garment and going to a wedding and a public event and how you would be perceived or feel?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above, really. It was one of those that it was okay, you've not had to think about this for a long time, because I'd found a way to cope, with the binders and what have you. I'd kind of got to the point where I was just sort of, going on day after day and coping with it, and this kind of threw the curveball of, oh, now you have to think about this again. Yeah, in a situation that's important, in a situation that, this is someone you love, this is my sister, and this day is so important to her. But also, social situation, how are people gonna look at me? Weddings are horrible, aren't they? Because you're either, if it's someone you're close to, you're a bridesmaid. Well, there's no way on earth I'm going to ever be a bridesmaid. But there's a certain expectation, and my sister's wonderful, and thankfully never put those expectations on me. But I guess I kind of had them in the back of my brain myself.
And so, how did this spiral manifest itself? What happened?
Well, I was just having panic attacks constantly. I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to do anything. I felt like, my blood pressure just felt like it was through the roof. I was going to work, but I was not doing well. I was not able to process anything anyone was telling me. I was quite dangerous in the car. I I had no awareness of my own body. I felt like I was kind of living an out-of-body experience, and some kind of automaton was controlling my movements, and I was living entirely in my own head, which was not pleasant for anybody. And at that time, I started therapy, and that did help, because through a number of months, I realised that I had spent all my life managing symptoms. How can I deal with this thing in this moment? How can I deal with that thing in that moment? But actually, I'd never really figured that I could do something about the root cause, and the therapy helped me to see that I really did need to deal with the dysphoria at the heart of it all, because that was what was causing me the pain.
Because you talked about in your letter to Mr. Vahidi, you talked about your chest and how you've felt and dressing, and you talked about a time when you took a knife. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was a very low point. I guess that was when I was about 13. And I mean, puberty's horrible for everybody. Nobody likes going through that. When your body is becoming something completely alien in entirely the wrong direction, it puts another layer on it, which makes it decidedly more unpleasant. And as that process went on, and I'd always loved, when I was a child, being on the beach without a shirt on, and everyone assumed I was as a boy anyway, and all these things that I could do, and how I was perceived by other people, all of a sudden went out of the window, and I couldn't do that anymore. I wasn't perceived that way anymore. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I was becoming something just horrible. Yeah, and I had waited until everyone was out, and I was standing there, and I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I'd read about mastectomies, and I thought, well, it doesn't sound that complicated. Yeah, this is a 13-year-old brain, I must add. It doesn't sound that complicated. It's just an incision, and then it'll be done, and I've got to try, because I can't continue like this. I'm 13 years old, and I'm looking down the barrel of the rest of my life like this, and I can't do it. But thankfully, I'm not a big fan of pain, and I couldn't do it. And I just kind of stood there awkwardly staring at myself until I just sort of saw sense and thought, no, I can't do that. And actually, interestingly enough, on the news a couple of weeks later, there was a case of a woman who had done the same thing as an adult, and tried to do it herself, and had died from the blood loss. So, I mean, at the time I thought I was cowardly, but I guess I just saw sense in the end. But that was no means the end of it. That was definitely not a finding your peace moment. Yeah,
you've shared with me some of your pictures, and there's a picture of you as a younger person in a pair of red shorts in a river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When was that?
That was Australia, I believe, in 2005. I think it was 2006, something like that.
So you would have been how old?
6. Yeah.
6 years of age.
Yeah. 6 or 7. And that was just a fantastic holiday. And the most amazing thing about that holiday was that at that time I still had long hair. I only cut my hair off when I went to high school. And so in this country, I was perceived as female, no matter how masculine my clothes were or anything like that, or the way I moved, the way I talked. Because I had long hair, I was obviously a girl.
Well, you look very masculine in that picture.
Exactly. Well, when I went to Australia,
it looks like you've got some abs going on there.
Yeah, well, I've always enjoyed my my exercise, but I've always enjoyed cake a bit much as well. So but yeah, no, Australia was amazing because guys in Australia have long hair. It's culturally acceptable for guys to have long hair, and all of a sudden, the minute I got there, everyone assumed I was a guy. And it was the most amazing thing, because then I could just be myself, and that I have such fond memories of that holiday. Partly because Australia is an amazing place. My mum's Australian. I have a family history there, and I've always felt very very comfortable and confident there. It was an amazing experience to finally go, oh yeah, this is I don't have to hide here because people assume that I am what I feel I am. And it was quite a shame to come home, but I think that was there weren't many holidays after that where I was able to go out without a shirt on, and God, I missed that terribly. That was a massive part of my enjoyment of life, and And now, you know, I live by the sea. I love the sea. I'm in there quite a bit, and it's just every time I'm on the beach, I remember, you know, those holidays
Those times.
and then what it
There's a
felt like.
there's another picture of you standing, I think, in front of a camper with two girls, one on the left and the right, and you're in a
Yes.
black t-shirt and a Johnny Depp scarf over your head.
Oh yes, that was my pirate phase. Well, I say pirate phase. I'm still in the pirate phase. I must confess. So yes, that's my sister and my cousin.
How old were you then?
Oh gosh, like 12, I think.
So that's the onset of puberty then.
Yes, yeah.
And is that trouble face a trouble face because of how you're feeling about yourself, or is that just because you're being a pirate?
Well, I think there were a number of factors in that. Yes, that was the start of the worst time. Also because I was being asked to pose for a photograph, which autistic me really can't stand. And also because I was trying to look hardcore, because as you can see by that photo, my sister and my cousin were being particularly
Flirtatious.
yes, feminine, and you know, it was, my sister was, oh gosh, how old was she? She must have been about 16 at that point.
Okay, there's another picture there with you in a cowboy hat or an Australian bush hat and a black Guns N' Roses t-shirt.
Yeah, that was the same festival. Actually, that was Beautiful Days Festival, and that was my first festival, and it was amazing because again, festivals are such an inclusive space. You know, to go from school, which for me was always just hell on earth. You know, and somewhere where I was just mercilessly bullied and hated every second of it, and it was so judgmental, you know, of every tiny little difference.
And in that picture, you look like a young guy. You've got big shoulders, big arms. You're not overweight, but you don't look girly at all in that picture.
No, I never have, to be honest. It's just, I mean, partly blessed with genetics. I have my father's shoulders. I've never had particularly large hips or anything like that. You know, I've always had a fairly masculine shape, which has made passing much easier for me through my life. So thank goodness for that. But also, you know, the way I dress and the way I move and the way I talk, it was all sort of manufactured, you know. I would watch the way my dad walked and talked and held himself, and I would copy it because I wanted to look like that and be like that and be perceived in that way. So it was a very carefully curated image that I've always had.
There's another picture of you sitting on a swing there with quite long hair. And as you cast your eye down and you look at the legs in the shorts and the arms, that's very masculine in appearance. Is that part of the curation, or is that just you?
I mean, it's how do you separate the two? You know, that's what I am, and that's what I've always been. And I suppose that the curation was an attempt to broadcast to the world that is what I am. You know, in school, in PE, all the time I was bullied because I didn't shave my legs and I didn't do this and I didn't do that. I didn't wear makeup, all the rest of it. But that was all, you know, it was all a statement. It was all, this is not, you know, what you girls are is not what I am. And I won't compromise what I am because you're going to bully me for it. So yeah, that was, I mean, I had the long hair, and I do, as I cut it short for high school, but I do have it long again now. I've got my dreads. But it's because I didn't want long hair in a girly long hair way. I wanted long hair in a kind of rock star kind of way, you know. You
carry that well.
Thank you. Yeah. You know, I've always been into, you know, that the Guns N' Roses. That was kind of the start of the heavy metal rabbit hole for me. I'm still very much in that rabbit hole as I sit here in my Iron Maiden t-shirt.
Great. So at that period in your life when you were going to those rock festivals, was this at the period of like your life when you really wanted to self-harm and get rid of your chest, or was that later?
Yeah, no, this is, yeah, exactly. That was kind of prime time from the ages of sort of 11, 12 to 18-ish, when I figured that it was all over, you know, because the purpose of, you know, I used to hit myself, I used to hit my chest a lot, multiple times a day, and whilst my body was changing, because, you know, I'd read about in China the binding of women's feet to make them small and things like that, and I thought, well, if I can inflict enough trauma on my chest, maybe it won't continue to grow. Maybe I can stop it. Maybe I can do something about it. And so I tried. Of course, it didn't work. And by the time I sort of got to uni, I was like, okay, well, that hasn't worked. But now, now it's stopped. Now I am sort of fully formed, and the puberty is finished. So there's no point in doing that anymore. But then I developed an eating disorder instead. So it was a different form of self-harm then through uni.
Absolutely. Did you ever talk to your mum or your parents or your sister about any of this?
Well, it's one of those. I didn't tell them about the beating. I didn't tell them about the incident with the knife. I did tell them in so much as whenever my mum attempted to take me shopping for underwear or anything like that, I would have a complete meltdown, and I would not stop crying and screaming, and I refused to wear a bra of any description. I had these like sports compression t-shirts which I wore for years, which was very uncomfortable, in the heat, especially when we went abroad and stuff like that. So I did tell them sort of in an indirect way, in my behaviour and my distress at anything related to being female. When I was in primary school and in year 2 actually, so this was 5-6 years old, and we had to do a maypole dance, and all the girls had to wear these horrible checkered dresses, and you had to be partnered with a boy, and you had to do this dance, and I was just oh god, I was so unhappy, and I was arguing my case until I was blue in the face. And of course I was not allowed to wear shorts, I was not allowed to do this or that or whatever. I had to wear the dress, I had to do the dance, whatever. And of course, as a 5-6 year old, when you're told by your teachers and your parents, well, no, you just have to do it, I just did it, and I just hated myself for it, and I hated every second of it. And thankfully, it all kind of culminated when I was about, oh gosh, how old was I? I don't know, maybe 10, something like that. And my mum bought me this skirt, and then I was really angry with her, and she said, "Oh, just please, for me, just try it. Have an open mind. Please, just try it on." And I put this thing on, and of course, by this point, I've perfected the shoulders back. Masculine walk, masculine way of sitting, all of this my whole demeanour is masculine. And so I put this skirt on, and she just burst out laughing, and she said, "You look absolutely ridiculous. You look so uncomfortable. I'm never going to make you do this again." But it took so long. That was a battle I had with both of my parents for years. Oh, why is it such a big deal? Why can't you just wear a dress? Why can't you just? And I was like, my response was always, well, why is it such a big deal for you that I do? Why does it matter? I was always kind of majorly upset whenever, weddings and christenings and funerals and all of these things, why are the lads all allowed to wear blazers, and why do you expect me to wear this horrible thing?
There's another picture of you in the river with jeans rolled up around your knees and a denim jacket on. How old were you then?
I guess that was pre-uni, so I guess about 17. We went on holiday to Scotland, and I dyed my hair sort of orange, and I looked like a Highland cow apparently. It wasn't a good look for me. So yeah, that is in the era in which I'm wearing those really boiling compression tops. Although thank goodness in Scotland it was not that warm, so
a bit cooler. Because once again, that picture, you just look like a young guy. You've got guy legs, calves, in terms of development, and you're a little bit slighter, but there's no sense in which anyone would mistake you for being anything other than a young guy.
No, and people didn't. It was it was only really when then I went to uni and I grew my hair out and I got my dreads, and then it was long hair girl. But before that point, everyone just assumed I was a guy, which it's a double-edged sword really, because on the one hand that's amazing and that's what I wanted, but on the other hand then I had to admit to these people what my name was, and the horror that these people would feel, and I remember in high school one of my teachers, literally for months and months after she realised, she apologised to me every time I saw her. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I thought you were a boy." And it was just like, I just didn't want people to make a big deal of it, but people got so mortified when they thought that they'd, made a mistake. And it's like, no, just leave it. Just leave it. You're making it worse. You're making it incredibly awkward for me and everyone else. Just leave it. Or, It's not fun to have to, to have had that euphoria of somebody gendering you correctly and then have to go through the whole rigmarole of actually no, that's not true, that's not correct, and you can see on the register that my gender is not what you assumed. And it's just, it was a very painful process that happened on a daily basis with people that I met. Yeah, I mean,
there's another picture of you with some bracken, and you're carrying a drink and a denim jacket, again a brown denim jacket, and you've got your hair cut short. When was that?
That was, I guess that was a similar time to the one in Scotland, maybe a little bit later. Yeah, that was on a walk. We were going up somewhere in the Peak District, and I probably not the most practical clothes for going for a hike in, but I had to look cool. So
you certainly did.
I tried. I'm not sure I pulled it off all the time, but yeah, and that it was great being able to, at that point, I think my family had kind of resigned themselves to the fact that this is how I was going to dress, this is how I was going to hold myself, this is how I was going to move through the world, and they kind of weren't annoyed by it anymore. They weren't trying to make me something I wasn't anymore because I'd fought so hard for so long, and they hadn't got anywhere with trying to convince me otherwise. So,
stepping forward a little bit, there's a picture of you in your Iron Maiden t-shirt with your arms across your chest. And when was that taken?
So that was literally a few months ago, and there's a funny story attached to this photograph because essentially at the gym that I go to, we have like an inspiration wall. So there's all these black and white photographs of amazing athletes, martial artists, weightlifters, endurance athletes, all these different people at the height of their physical performance. And there are all these photographs all over this wall, which is amazing to look at, when you're standing there working out, you're thinking, wow, I could look like that. And anyway, we were having a discussion one time because we have open training on Friday morning. We were doing a bench press day without the coaches there, and I can't remember who suggested it, but somebody said, "Oh, wouldn't it be funny if we just substituted one of those photos for one of us, and gradually over a course of weeks, if we just gradually made that wall us, and see how long it takes for our coaches to notice." And I, being autistic, kind of didn't realise that was a joke, so I did it. And I took in this photograph and I substituted it. And the other thing as well is kind of hilarious is that this was in April, and just before April, and I totally forgot that April Fool's was a thing because as an autistic person, April Fool's is just awful for me because it just goes straight over my head. But that's what they assumed it was, and anyway, the coaches they were never going to find out, to be honest. But somebody snitched on me and told them. But they thought it was hilarious, and so it's still there. It's still on the wall.
It's still on the wall.
It's still on the wall next to all these amazing athletes, which I'm quite embarrassed about because I definitely do not look like them. But it's just kind of hilarious, really.
Well, you have big shoulders, big arms. I mean, you don't look very feminine there, I must say.
Well, no, that was not the intention in the slightest. The gym has been brilliant for me. I say I've always been built fairly masculine, but the gym has been great because it's enabled me to put on significantly more muscle mass than women typically have, and that's helped with the way people perceive me, definitely, because all right, they do see the short hair, but also if I'm wearing a shirt with cut off sleeves, they look at me and they don't think that I'm female at all. I've been gendered correctly a lot better since I've started doing that weightlifting and stuff like that. So
there's another picture of you in your kitchen, I think it is, where you're walking away from the camera and it's showing your back, and I think you've got a weightlifting belt on.
That is my kilt.
Oh, that's your kilt. This is the kilt. This
is the epic kilt that my mum bought me for Pride this year.
Oh, Highlander.
Yeah. No, it's
where's the sword?
Oh, well, I actually do have a sword. I have a number of swords which I my martial arts master gifted to me. So yes, I do a bit of that. I did do Hema for a while as well, which is historical European martial arts. I did longsword, broadsword, that kind of thing. So yes,
wow.
It's good fun.
Well, you look amazing in that picture,
Thank you.
and there's nothing feminine about that back.
No, indeed. And I think so. By this point, I kind of moved on from binders, and I discovered tape, and that's been brilliant for me because it was always majorly dysphoria inducing whenever I had to wear a sleeveless shirt or anything, and you could kind of see the binder through it. It looked like a sports bra or something, and I always kind of hated that. But the nice thing about the tape is that you can't see it from the back. You can go out like that, and nobody, there's no clue. And even with even if you're wearing a sort of a crop sleeve thing, and you can see the tape at the side, most people just assume it's a sports injury, or because people use that kind of stuff to tape their leg muscles or their shoulders or anything like that. So it's good for stealth. And it's much better. You can go in the sea and all of these things. It's kind of given me some of that freedom back, which has been really nice. I can sleep without a shirt on now because, you're not allowed to sleep with a binder, of course, but I don't want to sleep without a shirt on without anything because that's horrible. The tape's been really good, but that's a fairly recent discovery for me.
So, in spite of the fact that you go to the gym, you're on testosterone, you've got great muscle development that would be the envy of many, many people. And clearly you've got genes that are good going on there. You still have this horrible depth of dysphoria.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that, at the end of the day, you can sort of mask it as much as you like. You can wear as much tape and whatever as you like, you can go to the gym as much as you like, but you're never going to change the basic shape of you. And it's something that I guess nobody really realizes, because from externally, nobody has to see that, because it's always covered up. I'm always taped up, bound, or whatever. So from the outside, it's like, well, why do you even need that? Because clearly, it's not something that people don't look at me and see, that my chest is fairly flat with the the binding and what have you. So they don't look at me and think, oh yeah, that's definitely a woman. So I guess a lot of people go, well, why would you put yourself through that surgery? But
well, you shared with me some of your art, and there's a picture there with a guy that does look remarkably like you, ripping open his chest with his fingers, and there's blood coming out. And tell me about that picture.
That picture came about because I wanted to be able to communicate what this feels like, because I don't think people who haven't been through it actually can understand it particularly well. And I love the written word. The written word has been fascinating to me all my life. But at the end of the day, I'm a visual artist. That's my degree, and it's how I can express my emotions without having to talk to people about it, because I'm not very good at doing it verbally.
I'm asking you to tell me what that means.
So it's how I feel. That's how I feel. It's if I could do what that person is doing, I would do it. Every time I look at myself, that is the urge that my brain is giving me to do. Take your hands and carve yourself open. That is, that's the dream. I have dreamt of doing that. That was what I was trying to do, all those years ago, when I couldn't summon the courage to do it.
And what does it feel like physically to you when you have those thoughts?
It's just, it's a difficult one, because on the one hand, it's fury and injustice, and just the depth of the frustration is just massive. But on the other hand, it's hopelessness and despair, and a lack of being able to see any way out. That if the way out is for me to rip my chest open and die, then that is the way out I'm going to choose. So it's kind of it's too much emotion. It's too much anger and pain and anguish. But on the other hand, it's the lack of all of that. It's there's nothing left. There's nothing that could make me want to stay here if I have to continue like this. So I guess it's a mix of too much and not enough, all at the same time, I suppose. But the overarching emotion is just this extraordinary pain.
And have you ever thought about seriously taking your own life?
I have, yeah. It's not something that I've ever sort of planned or, actually gone out with the intention of doing. But I've thought about so many ways that I could do it. I kind of settled on how I would do it if I was going to do it.
How would that be?
Well, I mean, it's quite a long and involved process because there's a lot you've got to consider, and I wouldn't want to put any strain on my family any more than, I wouldn't want them to find my body or any of those kinds of things. So, I sort of thought about, well, would I save up and get a boat and go out to sea and grab a heavy rock and chuck myself off? Anything that would mean that nobody would have to
deal with
me. Like that, because that was always. I'm not a big fan of horror. I'm quite a scaredy cat, and especially crime and stuff like that. Somebody finding a dead body has always been that's just horrifying to me. And
yet your picture is horror, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's because it's me. I don't feel anything for it. If it was somebody else, then I think I would find that image distressing. But because it's me, I don't really care. That sounds quite morbid, doesn't it? But yeah, I think that's the point. I think it's not so much about myself. It's about how other people would have to pick up the pieces and deal with the consequences. It's something that happened at work last year. One of my colleagues took his life, and two of my other colleagues were the ones who found him. And the mental health impact on them was horrendous, and I wouldn't want to deal, to put that on anyone that I love or anyone at all, really. So yeah, it was one of those that it would take a lot of thinking about. It would take a lot of planning. And I'm not sure that I could ever do it to them, because no matter how I went about it, I'm not gonna be so naive that I would think that they would be fine. They would not be fine. Could I really do that to the people that I love? I don't think it's fair. But that does not sort of assuage the desire for it. You feel like you're hanging on behalf of somebody else, not because you really want to.
So on the basis of you feeling intensely earlier this year, you set out on a journey and you contacted Mr. Vahidi's office at TransgenderCare. How did that come about?
So this was at the end of a very long and painful journey of trying to find someone who would help. It started, of course, with the NHS. It was actually sometime last year, it was the year before last. I was put on the waiting list for a gender identity clinic, and I hadn't heard anything from them for a year. So I gave them a ring. They didn't answer. A few weeks later, they rang me back, and the guy said, I don't actually represent the GIC. I am the support person for people on the waiting list, and I'm sorry to have to tell you that the waiting list is 8 years long. And I thought, oh my God, I can't imagine, and I know that there are people out there who've been waiting, 5, 10, 15 years for gender-affirming care, and that's not even for the surgery. That's just to be seen, that's just for a consultation. And I had it, to be honest, with that, and so I decided to look privately. Went to did lots of research, talked to lots of different people, attempted to talk to lots of different people. Some people were not especially responsive, and it was hard not to feel like just a number on a spreadsheet, for these people. Nobody really struck me as somebody who was doing this because they wanted to help. It was all, oh, well, they're very busy, and it's this amount of money for a consultation if you want to even speak to somebody. Some of them didn't even bother getting back to me, and it was quite hard because you've reached a breaking point. You've decided you have to do something, and then nobody wants to help. And that's quite hard to navigate, because you've come to this point of hopelessness and despair, and nobody is doing anything to relieve you of that. That it just felt so lonely. And at this point, I didn't really feel like I could talk to anybody about it, which is wrong on my part. I'm sure I could have done. But and then I found you guys, and you were the only ones who actually talked to me for a start. Everyone else had been these sort of soulless emails about price lists and availability. And I talked to you, and there was a conversation with a human being, a caring human being who wanted to help me, and I just hadn't had that from anyone else at this point. Yeah, and that was just massively. It was a massive relief, to be honest. As I say, I hadn't really talked about this to anybody, and it was a relief to talk to someone who had experience of this and knew what this was like. Has dealt with people with these issues, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, this is not me floundering alone in the deep dark sea of depression. This is actually me in a universe in which other people feel this, and there are good people out there, and it was the first time I really felt like actually there is an end point to this. There is a solution, there is help, there's something I can do that will make my life worth living.
Mr. Vahidi doesn't like talking about the money. He's much more focused on the patient and the person and what this affirming care will do. And generally speaking, in our initial engagement with patients and with you, we're not really concerned about the costs. They are what they are. We're much more concerned about you and your journey and how we can help support you in that. Did you sense that in any way? And
yes, definitely. And I think being offered a consultation, with no sort of price tag or expectation, was really lovely, because a lot of these places, that is, you have to put your hand in your pocket before you can even talk to anybody. And when you're undecided about who you want to go with, by the time you've had a couple of different consultations to talk to different people, you've spent thousands of pounds already.
Well, Mr. Vahidi's never believed that people should have to pay a consultation fee to decide whether they want to talk to him about their surgery.
Yeah.
And that it's probably, private healthcare is probably the last bastion of where you have to pay a big wedge of money to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Even lawyers these days will give you an initial call, or a few minutes just to touch base and so on. So he's always had these what we call e-consults available free of charge, because he believes people need to feel comfortable with him. There's no point in pursuing a discussion about such profound surgery without people feeling comfortable about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to put a face to it as well. You need to feel like you're dealing with a person. There's a real person on the other end of that line. You're not talking to an automated system or anything like that. It just gives that sense of humanity, which I hadn't really been able to find anywhere else. In the NHS, and I'm not slandering anyone who works for the NHS, because blimey, they do an impossible job. But they just don't have the time to treat you like a human being. You are in and out, and they just can't give you the time of day, because they have such massive demands, and because they're so underfunded, understaffed. But then you would hope that you would get that from private healthcare, but unfortunately it's not always the case.
So you had an e-consult with Mr. Vahidi. How did that go?
That was lovely, actually. It was lovely to, as I say, to put a face to it, and actually have a chat to somebody who, who wants to help and is willing to answer any questions. I know, a lot of these questions you can find online, and there are lots of personal accounts of this kind of thing. But everyone's different, and you don't want to to go into something like this when all of your information has come from the internet. You want to talk to someone who knows what they're talking about and be able to ask them personalized questions, and feel like you're being seen, and that yourself and your story is appreciated, um, and that this person understands. I think a lot of medical professionals that I've spoken to over the years have not understood at all, and therefore been quite cold and quite dismissive, especially because, as I say, I don't wear my heart on my sleeve. I don't show my emotions particularly easily. When I'm in a situation of massive distress, I go into shutdown, and so my communication goes. I become very cold and aloof, and people mistake that for me being fine. I remember one time, when I was having panic attacks, I went to the GP. I talked to a doctor, and after about 10 minutes, he looked at me and he said, "Well, you seem fairly down to earth to me." Um, and it's just horrible because, you cannot make assumptions about somebody, in that situation, when you talk to them for 10 minutes. But I felt like that was never, when I've talked to you, when I've talked to Mr. Vahidi, you have never doubted the severity of the distress that I'm under. You've never misconstrued my lack of sort of emotional output with any kind of lesser amount of suffering. You've always kind of understood where I'm coming from and believed me. That's the other thing. People don't believe me when I tell them these things, because I'm not screaming and crying and shoving it in their face, because that's just not what I am. But you've never questioned that, which has been massively important for me, because it's something that I always fear when I have to talk to someone new. What are they going to think of me? They're not going to believe me. Um, so yeah, that was wonderful.
Mr. Vahidi is very good at connecting with people at a more emotional level, as well as at a clinical level, and he's able to balance between the surgery and the person really well. So you've chosen to go ahead with surgery with Mr. Vahidi in November, I think it is.
Yep.
And why have you chosen him above anybody else?
I mean, it boils down to that, really, that I actually just sent a text message to my mum to say, this is the first time that I've been treated like a human being through this process. Everyone else has treated me like either, another brick in the wall, another tick in the box of a consultation, or they've treated me like a fascinating insect that's just crawled out from under a rock. With my psychological assessments, my psychiatrist assessments, and all those kinds of things, it's always been very much, okay, this is someone who's trained in medical problems, and you are a problem that needs solving. And it's always felt quite clinical, and it shouldn't be clinical. It's this is emotional as much as it is medical. I am a human being. And to be treated like one has been, what's kind of kept me going, and to find somebody who's actually willing to give me the time of day. I would much rather go with somebody like that, than somebody who just sort of sees an appointment request come in and processes it and takes my money and goes, yep, that's good, we'll get you in and out and never hear from you again. It's the humanity that has been different with you guys from literally anyone else that I've spoken to throughout this whole thing. Even with my being prescribed my hormones and all of it, it's been just such a horrible process of me just banging my head against the wall to trying to get care, but you cared from the start, and that's why.
Thank you. You shared one last picture that I'd like to look at called transcendence. Are you a spiritual person?
It's an interesting word, spiritual. I think it's not the way I would necessarily describe myself, but at the same time, as much as I pretend to be, I'm not a cynic. I'm not religious in any way, but I do think that we understand very little, and probably what we understand the least about is our own selves, our own minds, the way we work, the way we interact with the world around us, and we have such tiny minds. When you look at the universe, we are nothing essentially, and therefore to presume that we know anything about anything is kind of ridiculous, really. And therefore, I suppose I must be spiritual, because I don't believe that that what we see and what we experience is the sum of it. And there's a certain amount of explanations in physics in terms of energy, and the sort of, in Buddhism, the cyclical nature of life. It connects very strongly with the idea in physics about exchange of energy, and so we never really go anywhere. Our lives and our bodies are recycled from long dead stars, and if that's not spiritual, I don't know what is. We are more than the sum of our parts, but not necessarily in a religious sense, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. One amazing trans woman was, she died last year, was Lynn Conway, who came out at IBM and lost her job. Years later, they apologized for it. And she was a pioneer in so many patents, and is largely responsible for a lot of the patents and chip design that we benefit from on our amazing mobile phone devices. She was an incredible scientist, and she was also an incredible advocate for trans rights. And one of her statements, one of her quotes is, "Question everything."
Yes. Yeah.
And from your picture there, transcendence, once again, that looks remarkably like you, with a somewhat angelic halo around you. Tell me about that picture for you, what it really means in your life.
I mean, so the title is Transcendence, and that was the feeling that I was trying to convey there. This is about soul searching. It's about unpicking everything about yourself and putting yourself back together and becoming the person that you are and that you believe you can be. It's about reconnecting with the person that you kind of hoped that you might be someday. The inner child is there and is rooting for you, to become the person that they hoped that they were going to be. It's very much, I guess it is very much a spiritual moment, because in forgiveness and in understanding yourself and forgiving yourself for trying to maybe be something that was not authentic, it's a kind of enlightenment. I mean, I've never experienced enlightenment in the Buddhist sense of the word. I'm not sure that I ever will, but there is a certain amount of clarity that comes with that when you reach a decision and all of a sudden you understand that it's the right decision. You can come into your own self, and there's much more of a profound sort of sense of peace, of, okay, the universe is unknowable, I am unknowable, but here I am, maybe a little bit closer to understanding than I was before. And it's an elevation from just everyday life. It's going, okay, the world is not what I thought it was. Science is not what I was taught in my GCSEs. The world is not black and white. It's not, it's not simple. Nothing's simple. There's a sea slug out there that can photosynthesize. Is it a plant? Is it an animal? Who knows? The world is more than any of us understand.
The spectrum of life is very broad, isn't it?
Exactly, it really is. And if we can accept that in ourselves and understand that we are more than what we think we are, we can do more than what we believe we can. That is transcendence.
And do you think that embarking on this journey with Mr. Vahidi is going to elevate you to that place where your transcendence will shine through and become what you envisage it to be?
I believe so. I mean, I think this is it's a lifelong process. It's a lifelong quest, if you like. I don't think we ever stop learning about ourselves, nor should we, or the universe. But I know that this is right for me, and I think this will help me to understand myself better, or to better embody what I already understand about myself. Um, and this has been such a massive source of pain for me for so many years. I'm not sure what life's going to be like without that pain, but I know that I am more than my pain, and I'm kind of fascinated to see where it's going to take me. Because before I started school, when I was sort of, when I was a baby and up until the age of 3, I am told that I was, the life and soul, and I was happy, and I never stopped laughing, and I was silly and goofy and fun. And all of a sudden I started school and I became this incredibly withdrawn, depressed, cynical individual, and my family missed me. And I was told all through my life, oh, we wish you were like you were when you were 3 years old. And I'm like, well, okay, firstly, yeah, everybody changes, but also, was that me? Is that the person I am without this pain? I want to find out, and I think this is the first step towards finding that out.
Do you feel safe with Mr. Vahidi?
I do, yes.
Why?
I think it comes down to the understanding, as I say, the lack of judgment, the time that he and you are willing to spend in understanding, asking for this personal statement. And it's interesting because it's very different. When I was asked for the psychiatrist assessment, that felt very much like a diagnosis of a problem. Whereas that's not what Mr. Vahidi was asking for. He was asking for who are you? What is your story? And that's personal. That's human. That's not cold or clinical or medical. That's an attempt to understand the person underneath it all. And I very rarely feel safe with people I don't know. I've got very good at masking over the years, but I feel like I don't have to in this space, because you have experience of people on all sort of in all areas of the neurodivergent spectrum, and the trans spectrum. There is no judgment, and I feel like in medical spaces there's just so much judgment all the time. It's quite refreshing to not have to deal with that, and therefore you feel safer to be who you are, and ask the questions that you want to ask, and not have to feel like you have to put on a front. Thank goodness, because that's exhausting.
It is exhausting, and I think that we know that the diversity of the universe, creation, nature, whatever you want to call it, the spectrum is broad, and you can't just pigeonhole people. I think that the psychological assessments that we still have to do in the UK are a clinical diagnosis and a process to make sure that people are of sound mind and that they know where they're going with this, because this is irreversible surgery that we're talking about. But at the same time, the humanity and the connection between your surgeon and you is more than just a scalpel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think at that point we will look forward, Morgan, to talking to you post-operatively when you have had time to recover and see how you're feeling post-surgery.
Yes, absolutely. And I must say that just feeling like there is hope, is so important, because in a world where trans people are not safe and waiting lists are insane, feeling like there is a point at which this will start to get better. Just that, it means the world, and it makes day-to-day life easier, because you have something there that's going to help you sometime in the future. It's coming every day. It's you're one day closer, and it keeps you going. It gives you hope. So yes, I shall look forward to that day, and talking to you again at some point after that day. And
It's exciting.
It is, yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed, Morgan, for giving me your time.
Always a pleasure.
Take care now.